Well, welcome to the program, Kjel. I'm really looking forward to chatting today.
Thanks, Simon. It's we've been putting this off for a few months or a few weeks now. I'm glad we were able to connect finally.
My listeners know that I'm a massive fan of fintech and the sort of the payment side of things, so they understand why I've got you on today. So really looking forward to hearing a lot more about Taulia.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. And fintech seems to be the hot topic of today's time. So happy to talk more about it.
So maybe the question I'd like to ask is, how did you come to Treasury, and how did you end up in this industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. Funny enough, I actually grew up in a small business, a farm up in the northwest of the U.S. And I realized very early on, as much as I love farming, not a lot of money to be made. So I decided I wanted to chase the money, and then I decided to go into finance. So there's very few people that actually probably go get a degree in finance and then actually go into the background and the role and the job is actually finance as well. I think there's a few studies out there. You don't always exactly go into the job role or description that you actually go to school for. But I got into finance, and I realized very quickly that in order to make money in this world, that having come from a small farm and small family farm that today exists but barely makes it, is that you got to figure out how to sell and how to talk to people and how to be able to, at the end of the day, you're selling money in finance. And so that's the route I chose.
And I mean, Taulia has been a great ride for you. Tell us a little bit about the business and what you guys do and the journey.
Yeah, so I joined Taulia roughly around 6 years ago. I joined Taulia from JP Chase, and Taulia was interesting to me because they were kind of building something at the time. Really, it started during the recession here in the U.S., and they were looking at how do we get cash to small businesses, and how do we do that more effectively. At the time, the circumstances in the U.S. where Dodd-Frank had been put in, banks were tightening up lending. And it was very intriguing to me of how do we actually push cash to small businesses. And so I joined Taulia. I'll be honest, I joined as just an originator, so sales. I covered a few different territories in the U.S. and then actually opened up our Australian office there in Sydney. And so it's been a great ride. I now lead a sales team here at Taulia across the Americas into the Asia Pac. But the company, when I started, was very small. And we've grown into, one of, I would say, the leading fintech in the supply chain finance or early payment landscape.
So tell us a little bit about how the business differs from, I guess, the other offerings that are out there.
Yeah, so like I said, we originally got in this because during the recession of small businesses, and our model or motto here at Taulia is really kind of liberating cash, and how do we get that cash to small businesses. So we kind of took the direction of early on doing something called where companies can actually fund their own early payments, and then we realized after we did that suppliers needed to submit their invoices to get paid early, and we needed to fix that broken process. And then later, our third product, which has really taken off, is supply chain finance, where these early payments are actually funded by banks and institutions. We differ simply because we offer all of these early payments to any size of company. So down to the mom and pop who mow the grass, we want to be able to get cheap rates, cheap money to these suppliers, so they're able to continue to grow their business and pay their people to work for them. That's probably the most important thing that we set out on, was really to focus on these small businesses globally.
I know for myself, as COVID was hitting, I was straight on the phone to all of my clients to try and get my money earlier. Has COVID really been a boon for you guys?
Yeah, I think a lot of our customers who, and even prospects started to try to figure out a way, how do we get liquidity? How do we get this money to our supplier base? It's more about supply chain health, and how do we get this out to these suppliers to make sure they're here tomorrow and the next day to support us. And so we've actually seen a huge uptick around our platform, around small businesses taking early payments. And our goal is just to get the money to these suppliers. So I would say it's definitely been a huge uptick in adoption and acceleration of the early payments. what's interesting is that, money also got very expensive there for a little bit back in mid-March. And so, finding liquidity in the marketplace to be able to fund these early payments was also something that, was a challenge, right? And not only is it, you want to get money, but it's what price can you find the money in the markets from obviously different funders and different banks.
And so how does your technology help buyers and suppliers to get that money quicker?
Yeah, so we essentially built a SaaS solution that connects into a buyer's ERP system and really makes it, free to the suppliers. So the suppliers can log in, they can see the visibility of their invoices, and they literally click a button and accept the early payment offer. Taulia has a little bit different model than a lot of other providers out there. We don't change the rate. The rate is fixed by the buyer or by the third-party funder. We don't play games. We want to make sure that supplier has the same rate today as they do tomorrow. And that way that supplier can make business decisions and be able to take advantage of those early payments. There's nothing that they have to do, or there's no mandatory or anything like that. They can pick and choose. We really tried to make it as easy as possible for a supplier to turn it on, turn it off, choose which invoice when, and really make it up to them to put them in the driver's seat of how do they manage their cash flows as a company.
And Kjel, we were saying before, you obviously talk to a lot of treasurers, as I do. What's been your strategy for networking over your career?
Yeah, it's a good question. Early on when I started into finance, I worked for American Express. And, there where I was able to live in my marketplace. So, most of the people I was talking to in finance were, in the city I lived in. So that made it easy, right? You'd go to local market, local social events. You'd go to certain, things via LinkedIn and now we use. But it was really kind of just getting, I did a lot of golf. I joined country clubs. I really tried to get into that local atmosphere and across the other financing. Believe it or not, one of the things I was told early on in my career is buy a home in a neighborhood where most people that you want to talk to or want to network with live. So I did that based out of some information I was given from a mentor of mine. And that worked really, really well when you were building your network in a local area. Now, and at JP Morgan, I started to have to, started covering multiple states, multiple regions. Now I cover countries. So it really has changed from growing a network, which is very, within your city, within, your state, to now growing a network that's very, very global. And that's different, right? And so it's via LinkedIn, it's via meetings. I love to look at different articles out on LinkedIn or in the media. People highlight it and reach out to them via email, via LinkedIn, whatever that might be, and just say, hey, congratulations. I saw this article. I think it's phenomenal what you're doing. Huge, huge fan. And people want to connect. People want to connect with people that, have like beliefs and are supportive. And I think that's how I've, been able to build my global network, which, like I said, is more difficult than doing it more in your city or state.
Yeah, and it has to be a lot more targeted, doesn't it? I know for me, running things globally as well, LinkedIn's amazing because the information is all there, but it's just not, you don't bump into them at a coffee shop. You've got to be a bit more targeted and specific, don't you?
Yeah, and I think, who do you want to connect with, right? You only have so much bandwidth. I think I get probably 20 invites a day from people that want to connect. I look through them, and some of them are mainly, people who I don't know if I'll ever come across, different industries. They're looking to sell something. So I'm very strategic in who I want to connect with, because at the end of the day, I want those to be meaningful. To your point, though, how does this change things, right? So in the US, it's not exactly easy right now to go grab a coffee with somebody in New York if you're based in LA. I've actually started to do something called virtual coffees, so, send them a gift card, send them something, say, hey, look, when you get a chance, you can buy a coffee, but in the meantime, let's would you be willing to connect via, a WebEx or a Zoom meeting or something like that?
Yeah, I love that. I do virtual coffees, but I just they're just fictitious. I'll actually like sending them an actual card. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, look, I mean, it works. I actually used to do it years ago, and lo and behold, the times we're in, it's becoming more apparent.
Innovation is the key at the moment.
That seems to be the word. Yeah.
Now, you just mentioned before a mentor was saying to buy a house. Like, have mentors played a big part in your career?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, one of my key mentors, who's still really good friends today at American Express. I mean, he kind of gave me my first shot at transitioning from college into finance. He's also been, I reached out to him. He leads a very large sales team at a bank today, and he was a huge part of me kind of transitioning into sales. It's funny is when I got it and started working at American Express, I didn't realize I actually worked in sales for probably the first year. People asked me what I did, and I said, well, I work at American Express. And they're like, oh, that's great. So you work in finance? Yeah, I do. And they're like, well, what do you actually do? And I told them, and they said, well, you're in sales. I was like, no, I don't. I work for American Express. I work in finance. And then you start connecting the dots. So it took me a long time to actually come to the realization that I was in sales. That's not ever kind of the path I wanted to go in. I don't know anybody in my family that, has worked in sales or anything like that. They're all farmers. So it was very interesting to kind of see how people perceive what I did. Then I went into JP Morgan, and believe it or not, a banker is just a glorified salesperson. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what they do. They sell money. They call themselves a banker, but that's all they're doing is selling money and relationships.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of businesses a lot of jobs out there that you think it's one thing, but really, I mean, even if you look at it like a partner of a law firm or a partner of an accounting firm, really their job is glorified sales. They just talk about a really specific, skill set.
Yeah. I mean, look, you got to sell yourself to get a job. So, I mean, it starts from day one where whatever path you're going to choose is getting hired on as a doctor, a dentist, nurse, whatever it may be. But that's usually where it starts.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, you've been in the business for a while, Kjel. What would you say is the best piece of advice you wish you had have known back when you were starting your career that you know now?
That is a great question. Yeah, one of the things I think I wish I would have done early on is and done a better job at it is there's a lot of people that I've known over the years that at the time you probably would have thought, how does this person, you may have a disagreement or you may not see the way they do. And then as you mature out over your career, I think there was some times where early on in my career, I give thanks, right? And stay connected to those people. When you transition from one, let's say a competitor to another competitor, sometimes you lose those connections because you're transitioning from one bank to another bank, for example. And I think one of the things I wish I would have done is stayed in contact with some of those people that, sometimes it's not well received when you're transitioning to a competitor, right? From one bank to another. And don't get me wrong, over the years, I've done a fairly good job at it, but I think that's one of my gaps where I feel like I've missed the opportunity to give thanks and stay connected with some of those people over the years where now I'm running into them. So, and it's just great. It's not like there was any bad blood or anything like that. Bridges weren't burnt, but just staying connected. And I think there's a good way to do that via LinkedIn today. When you transition out of somewhere, do that. Back in the day, LinkedIn didn't exist. So if you didn't have their personal email or the personal phone number, sometimes it was more difficult to stay in contact. But I think that was something that early on I've learned a lot, and now I appreciate some of that more so today than I did back when I was younger.
Yeah. And what about hiring? When you're looking for people, what are the key things that you're looking for when you're hiring your direct reports?
Yeah, I was told early on in my career that, you can teach pretty much anybody as long as they have a good background in finance or something, whatever you're hiring them in. It doesn't matter if it's just finance, but have a basic understanding of what you do. You can teach most things. What you can't teach is hard work, right? The desire to essentially make a difference. So when I hire people, I ask people a lot of questions, questions around, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Like, why do you wake up? Is it family? Is it money? Is it personal goals? Is it a broader cause, a bigger cause? What is it? Because everyone needs a reason to wake up in the morning and work hard and dedicate to sales, because sales is a grind. Finance, there's ups and downs, right? Good day in the market, bad day in the market. So where are you getting out and trying to make a difference? And I think one of the biggest things I look at is is how do you want to make a difference? What are you striving for in your life? What's that personal goal? And then dive into that a little bit more with the individual. As far as other things, I would say integrity, right? A lot of the stuff we do, my sales team is spread all over the world. I'm not looking over their shoulder. So something somebody told me once upon a time is, work as if your mother's looking over your shoulder, right? Or your father looking over your shoulder, because at the end of the day, you don't know what a lot of these individuals are doing. You're hoping that they're doing all the right things, putting in a full time. And at the same time, I don't like to micromanage. I'm more of a macro. Like, I put in your time, hit your number, deliver what I've asked you to deliver. And if you want to go hit some balls, do what you want to do. That's great. That's kind of what I look for in an individual is what drives them, what gets them out of bed in the morning.
Absolutely. What then, you obviously talk to a lot of treasurers, as I do. What do you think makes a successful treasurer in the eyes of the CFO, the CEO, and the board?
That's a good question. I got a few examples. I early on in my career, I had a treasurer at a company. It was a small company. It's about $400 million in revenue. And I was working at American Express, and I'd come to him with an idea of using an American Express to pay some of his payables with a card. And he went to the CFO. It was actually a friend of mine from college. He went to the CFO, said, "Hey, look, I've got an idea. I got an idea if I want to do this." And the CFO was like, "Yeah, no, don't do that. It's a dumb idea. It'll never work. Don't waste your time." And so my buddy, who also I was selling to right at the same time, I said, "Look, go to him and say, hey, look, I'll take this on. I'll own it, but I get to keep 50% of whatever is created." So essentially, he was going to get a percentage back. And he went to the CFO, said, "Look, I'm going to own it. I'll own, don't worry about it." And he ended up saying, "Okay, fine, go ahead and move forward with the project." So about 5-6 months in, literally at the time, it was performing much greater than what we expected, to the point where this individual they had racked up almost $150,000 in cash rewards, discounts back on this. And he's like, "I think I got to talk to the CFO. I think I got to talk to my boss and tell him, where we're at, because this is way more than I expected." So the CFO said, "Hey, look, I got to talk to you about, this American Express project." And the guy's like, "Oh, I told you it was going to be a horrible idea. Like I told you not to do it." He's like, "Actually, no. What I need to talk to you about is, remember how we agreed you give me 50%? Right now, I deserve 75 grand, which was more than what he was, going to get in his bonus or anything." And the CFO was just like, "You're kidding me, right?" And we're only 4 or 5 months in at this time. And long story short, he got half of what he was owed from the CFO. But it really kind of gave me a pause and said, like, this is a guy that put his neck out. He didn't take any financial risk in the company. It was a project. He saw that there was value there, even though he was told, "Hey, this isn't worthwhile. Don't spend your time on this." And he did. He then moved on from that company and is now CFO of a company, very large company. And I'm not saying it was because of this, but I realized his personality was, I'm going to take a risk here. I'm gonna do something, even though I'm told it's already been tried or it's a dumb idea. I think that's where, in today's world, there's opportunity just to pressure test it. I'm not saying take risk, with financial within your company, but there's certain projects and certain opportunities that sometimes have been overlooked for whatever reason and hasn't worked. Things change, right? We started this year, had no idea that COVID was going to hit, and now here we are. And so even though it may not work yesterday, it may work today.
Absolutely. Technology is changing very, very rapidly, and you're at the heart of that, Kjel, with the Taulia business. How do you see the role of the treasurer changing in the years to come?
Yes, it's interesting. Most treasurers today, they're looking at, obviously, their cash conversion cycles. They're trying to figure out, where is the money today? Where is it going to be tomorrow? And how do we strategically make sure we're in a financial position for the weeks and months and years to come? Where fintech I see is playing a pretty strong role in this is, how do you toggle, or what tools do you have as a treasurer to be able to control that cash conversion cycle? What tools do I have to manage my cash positions in my bank accounts? So aligning with certain technologies like Taulia, fintechs, you can manage those things. There's cash forecasting tools out there. One of the tools we actually came out with a few months back. We've actually offered it for free to some of our customers, actually to all customers, to where companies can then look at this and forecast where their their pitfalls may be or their shortcomings may be with cash positions. And I think that's what's giving people what people are looking at as a treasurer is, you manage today, but what about tomorrow? What about a week from now? What are you seeing in the future? And how do you prepare for those days and be ahead of the curve and versus, reactive? So proactive versus reactive. I think that's where a treasurer, that's where their role is changing. Is I feel like that role has been, day to day, it's been, definitely reactive, but treasurers are definitely, a lot of companies were in a position to weather this storm with COVID. There's a lot that, will not weather and are having a much stronger, or much more difficult time weathering the storm.
Totally. Well, Kjel, it's been a pleasure chatting today. Really enjoyed your insights and good luck with the Taulia business. I think it's a great product.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Simon. Take care.